The email landed on a quiet Wednesday morning. Live Global Leadership Forum, Washington, D.C. Special guest, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. He stared at the screen. His aides exchanged uneasy glances. It wasn't just a talk show. It was an ambush waiting to happen. Michelle Obama would be the host, polished, powerful, loved in the West. But this wasn't just a conversation. It was a stage set for judgment. Everyone advised him to decline. They'll twist your words. It's a trap. This isn't our ground. But Traoré looked out the window of the modest presidential office in Ouagadougou, deep in thought. He had seen children eating leaves from the trees. He had buried soldiers who wore torn boots. He had walked through villages that smelled of smoke, dust, and hunger. Then he turned back and said quietly, "If I don't speak for them, who will?" A single nod. The ticket booked, the date confirmed. But what no one knew, not even him, was that this interview would shake the soul of a continent. And before it ended, there would be tears, silence, and something that would never be forgotten. The studio was cold, too perfect, too sharp. The walls glowed with LED lights, cameras swung silently on robotic arms, and behind the glass, producers whispered into earpieces. Traoré walked in alone, no entourage, no translator, no script, just his green military uniform and that calm, unshakable face. Michelle Obama was already seated. She stood and smiled, the kind of smile that hides 1,000 sharp edges. "Captain Traoré," she said warmly. "Welcome. Thank you for being here." "Thank you for inviting Africa," he replied. There was a pause, a subtle tension. Then the red light blinked on. Live. Michelle leaned forward. Her tone was soft, but the question cut like a blade. "You lead a poor country. There are reports of press restrictions, military power, fear in the streets. Some say you're no better than those you fought against. What makes you think you're different?" The studio grew still. Traoré didn't blink. He didn't rush to defend himself. He just looked at her, and then past her, as if he could see the millions of silent faces watching. And then, softly, he said, "May I tell you a story, Madame Obama?" And that's when it began. "I want to tell you about a boy I met," Traoré began, his voice steady. He couldn't have been older than 10. He was barefoot, carrying his younger sister on his back. Her legs were too weak to walk. Their parents had died in a raid. The rebels took everything. He found his way to our camp, not asking for food, just asking for safety. The studio was quiet. Michelle shifted in her seat. Traoré's eyes glistened, just slightly. "He told me, Captain, if I grow up, can I wear your boots? Not because he wanted to be a soldier, but because my boots meant I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I was standing." He paused. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just fighting bullets. I was fighting for children to stop running. Michelle's polished expression faltered, just a little. "This isn't about power," he said. "It's about dignity. For people who've been stepped on so long, they forget what it feels like to stand." The cameraman swallowed hard. The air was thick, and somewhere in Africa, an old woman watching from a dusty village wiped her eyes with her scarf. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was something more. Michelle hesitated, then asked, "But Captain, do personal stories excuse your grip on power? You dissolved political parties, didn't you?" Traoré nodded slowly. "I did." She leaned in. "So how are you different from a dictator?" There it was. The room tensed, but he didn't argue. Instead, he stood and calmly unbuttoned the left sleeve of his uniform. He rolled it up, slowly. The camera zoomed in. A deep, twisted scar ran from his elbow to his wrist, a scar that looked like it had burned through bone. "I got this the night I watched 3 boys die trying to guard a ballot box with sticks," he said. "Their blood is on the same ground where promises were broken over and over by the so-called elected." Michel blinked. "I did not dissolve parties because I feared their power," he said. "I did it because the people no longer trusted the masks they wore." He paused. "And if I must carry this scar forever so children can vote without dying, then I'll wear it with pride." The audience behind the camera went silent. Even the light hum of the air conditioning seemed to vanish. Michelle leaned back in her seat, folding her notes. The tone had shifted. Her questions softened. "What drives you, Captain?" "Truly?" Traore reached into his pocket. Not the one holding his phone or papers. The inner one, worn from years of use. He unfolded a small, creased photograph. The camera caught it. A woman, beautiful but tired, holding a baby with tired eyes but a soft smile. "My mother," he said, voice low. "She carried firewood on her head for 9 kilometers every week. She raised 5 of us alone. She never finished school, but every night she made us read by the light of a kerosene lamp." He stared at the photo like time had frozen. "She used to say, 'My son, one day, if your hands are clean, your voice will carry beyond the mountains.'" He folded the photo and tucked it away again. "She died before she could see this," he whispered. "I do not sit here because I am special. I sit here because a woman who had nothing still believed her son could lead something." There wasn't a dry eye in the control room. The audience watching back home began wiping their faces too. Michelle was silent for a long time. Her script was now useless. She looked at him differently now, not as a guest, but as someone who carried truth with every word. "One last question," she finally said. "Is it true that you refused to eat for 3 days during the crisis?" Traore nodded. "Yes." "Why?" He paused, his eyes distant. "There was a child. She came to me during a visit to a displaced persons camp. Her belly was swollen, but it wasn't food, it was hunger. Her name was Aissata." He swallowed. "She held my hand and said, 'I'm not scared of dying, but please let my little brother eat first.'" Michelle's lips trembled. "I left that camp, sat alone in my tent, and I couldn't swallow a single grain of rice. How could I? That night I gave my rations away." The camera caught a tear tracing down a woman's cheek in the live studio audience. "I'm not perfect," he said quietly. "But until every Aissata can eat before the generals, I will not sleep well, and I will not feast." The entire room was still. The world was listening. Michelle shifted in her seat. "You often speak about sacrifice," she said. "But you lead from behind lines now. What do you know about real risk?" Traore didn't flinch. He reached into his coat pocket again, this time pulling out a crumpled, dirt-stained letter. "This was handed to me by a young soldier named Armel before his last mission," he said. He unfolded it carefully and read, "Dear Captain, if I die today, don't cry. Just promise me my little brother can go to school with shoes. Tell my mother her son died clean, not because he was poor, but because he was proud. And if you ever speak on a big stage, please speak for me." Traore folded the letter again, pressing it to his heart. "Armel was 17, he said quietly. He died 3 days after writing this." Michelle looked down. No more words came from her. The camera zoomed slowly on Traore's face. Still, composed, but his voice shook just slightly. "I speak for Armel, for his mother, and for every boy who didn't get to grow old." Silence. One producer quietly wiped his eyes behind the glass. "Let me ask you something else," Michelle said gently now. "How do you justify military rule, even with these sacrifices?" Traore exhaled slowly. "Let me tell you about one night in Kaya." The screen behind them changed to a dim photo, a field tent, lit by weak bulbs, filled with wounded. A bomb had hit a civilian truck by mistake, he continued. I was there in 25 minutes. He pointed at the screen. That woman, her legs were gone. But she begged us to treat her baby first. He paused. And that baby? She was still breathing, just barely. Her cries were so soft, like she didn't even believe she deserved to be saved. The room went silent. I sat beside that baby for hours, holding her hand, watching her fight. I promised her I'd build something better, not for power, but for peace. Michel didn't interrupt. Sometimes, he said, what the world calls power is just a man trying to keep a child alive for one more day. The image faded. No script could prepare anyone for this, and somewhere across the continent, people watching wept for a baby whose name they would never know. The lights dimmed slightly as Michel took a long breath. You speak like a man carrying a burden too heavy, she said. Traore nodded. I am, he replied, and I carry it for those who can't speak anymore. He leaned forward, eyes focused now. One day, rebels took over a village near the Ghana border. They ripped down the Burkina Faso flag and burned it. He paused. But a 12-year-old girl named Salimata ran into the flames and pulled it out with her bare hands. Her arms were burned. Traore's voice trembled. When I visited her, I asked why she did it. She said, because it's not just cloth, it's our name. The room gasped. She said, Captain, they can take our food, our money, our homes, but not our name. He reached into a folder and gently laid a scorched, half-burned flag on the table. This is what I fight for. The screen behind them went black. No music, no noise, just the image of that flag. And people across Africa, young and old, sat in silence, tears in their eyes, hearts full of something they hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Michel leaned forward, her voice now quieter. Captain, why don't you ever speak about your personal losses? Traore looked away. Then he slowly began to speak. There was a young medic. His name was Yakuba. He was only 22. I met him once at a training camp, always smiling, always giving. Traore took a deep breath. One day, he volunteered to enter a red zone to save 2 wounded farmers. He never came back. Silence. I attended his funeral in secret. No cameras, no medals, just his mother. She was barefoot. She whispered to me, "Don't let his blood be wasted." He paused. His voice cracked. She gave me the only thing he left behind, a tiny notebook. Inside it he wrote, "If I die, don't mourn me. Just build a future where no mother has to bury her son in silence." The audience watching from homes across Africa were now wiping tears from their cheeks. Michel said nothing. Her face showed something rare, deep respect. Traore leaned forward and said, "I don't need applause. I need peace." The lights in the studio now felt warmer, heavier, like the story itself was controlling the atmosphere. Michel asked, "Do you ever feel hope?" Traore's lips formed a sad smile. "Yes," he said. "Once, in the north." He closed his eyes as if reliving the memory. "I was walking through a burnt-down village. Everything was ash. People stared with empty eyes. Then his tone softened. Suddenly, a little girl ran toward me. No shoes. Dust on her face. She didn't say a word. She just hugged my leg." The studio fell silent. "She wouldn't let go," Traore said. "She held on like I was the last thing she trusted in the world." His voice broke for the first time. She whispered one thing. "Please don't leave." Michel covered her mouth. Viewers could see her fighting tears. I stayed there that night, slept on the floor beside the villagers, because sometimes hope isn't in speeches, it's in the quiet arms of a child who still believes someone will fight for her. Across Africa, phones buzzed. Families shared the video. Mothers cried. Soldiers stood still. That one sentence, "Please don't leave," haunted them all. Michel hesitated, then asked, "Does your family support your fight?" Traore's gaze dropped. "My father never believed in me," he said plainly. "He thought I'd die young." There was tension in his jaw. "When I became leader, he didn't call, not for months. He thought I was just another man chasing power." Michel leaned in. "Did he ever call?" Traore nodded. "Yes, the day a convoy of children were rescued from terrorists and brought home safe." He smiled faintly. He called and said, "You're not who I thought you'd be. You became a shield. I was wrong." Then he looked into the camera. "That was the only time he said he was proud of me." He paused. "He died 2 weeks later. I buried him with that memory, one sentence." The whole studio was silent. Even Michel seemed to be holding her breath. Traore looked straight into the lens and said, "If this fight costs me everything, even my father's years, but saves even one child's future, I will keep going." And for many watching, this was no longer politics. It was something else now. It was personal. The studio was now quiet. You could hear Michel's breathing. But Traore wasn't finished. "There was a boy named Karim," he began. "He used to shine shoes outside a military post. He'd always say, 'One day I'll wear that uniform, Captain.'" Traore smiled faintly, then his expression darkened. "One morning I got a report. There'd been an attack near the market. I rushed there. The ground was covered in dust and blood." He paused, his voice tightening. "They found a letter in the pocket of a small body. It was Karim." Michel's eyes widened. "I still carry that letter," he said. He pulled a worn piece of paper from his jacket. In the boy's shaky handwriting, "Captain, if I die before I become a soldier, please fight for me. Please protect my mother." Michel's lips trembled. She whispered, "Did you find his mother?" Traore nodded. "I gave her my personal salary for a year, but no money could bring him back." Now millions of people across Africa were silently sobbing in their living rooms. One boy's dream turned into the burden of a nation. Michel took a long breath. Her eyes were red now. You've carried pain most people can't even imagine," she said. Traore didn't speak. He just looked at her with calm eyes. "I came here today thinking I would challenge your politics," she continued. "But I didn't know." She trailed off, visibly shaken. "People see uniforms, ranks, medals," Traore said. "But what they don't see are the broken nights, the faces that never leave you, the choices that haunt your dreams." Michel finally whispered, "How do you sleep?" "I don't," he said. The words hit the studio like thunder. "My people are still dying. My country is still healing. I'll rest only when they're safe." A tear slipped down Michel's cheek. Live on camera. It was a moment that no one expected, and in living rooms from Ouagadougou to Kinshasa to the Bronx, people weren't just watching a show anymore. They were watching a reckoning. This wasn't about politics. This was a man laying bare the soul of a continent. The host tried to move on, but Michel raised her hand gently. "Let me say one last thing," she said. She turned toward the camera, now barely holding herself together. "To every African child watching this, you deserve to be heard. And today I heard you through this man." Traore sat still, humbled but unmoved. "I judged him before I knew his walk," Michel said. "But now I see him not as a soldier, but as a father to a wounded land." The crew was silent. Some even wept behind the cameras. Then something unexpected happened. Phones buzzed all over Africa. Hashtags flooded social media. Africa rose. Karim's letter, You stand with Traore, from village women in Burkina Faso, to students in Nigeria, to soldiers in Mali. Africa was no longer silent. Something in Traore's pain had awakened collective memory and collective hope. Michel turned back to him. Thank you, not for your strength, but for your heart. Traore quietly responded, I only carry the voices of the forgotten. And with that, the interview wasn't just viral. It became a moment written into the heart of history. As the show neared its final minutes, the host's script was forgotten. Cameras kept rolling, but no one cared about time anymore. Michel slowly turned her chair toward Traore, this time not as a critic, but as a listener. Ibrahim, she said gently, what gives you the strength to keep going? Traore looked down, hands resting on his knees. He paused. Then, softly, the graves. The room tensed again. I visit them. The children, the mothers, the soldiers who died hoping their lives would mean something. He looked up, eyes heavy. I walk among their graves and I whisper, I won't let them be forgotten. That's my promise. Michel covered her mouth, eyes glassy. He continued, I am not perfect. I am not a saint. But I will not let their deaths be in vain. I will not bow to fear. I will not sell my people's future. Then, silence. Not even the host moved. In that silence, something sacred happened. A continent listened and wept. Michel sat up straight, as if something in her heart had cracked open. She took a deep breath. Captain, one final question. Traore nodded. What do you want the world to remember about Africa? He smiled softly. That we are not begging for pity. We are rising in pride. Michel blinked back tears. We are not helpless, Traore said. We are not broken. We are not waiting to be saved. He looked straight into the camera. We are the descendants of warriors, farmers, queens, kings. We are rising not because we were given permission, but because we remembered who we are. And with that sentence, Africa itself seemed to exhale. From Lagos to Dakar, from Johannesburg to Ouagadougou, families watched in silence, then rose to their feet. Michel leaned forward and said the words no one expected. I came to challenge you, but I leave inspired by you. Traore didn't reply. He simply bowed his head, respectfully. The interview ended, but something far bigger had just begun. The next morning, millions woke up, still replaying Traore's words. And then, one small post went viral. A young girl from Ghana had written, My father was killed by terrorists. I used to hate everyone in uniform. But today, I saw a soldier with a heart. Thank you, Captain. I believe again. That letter was shared by presidents, teachers, street vendors. It was translated into 14 African languages. Michel reposted it with only one caption, Africa heard you, Captain. And Traore, he didn't celebrate. He returned quietly to Burkina Faso, to his soldiers, to his people. No press tours, no speeches, just service. But something had changed. Africa was no longer whispering. Africa was speaking boldly, because one man, in one chair, had spoken with the weight of generations on his shoulders, and didn't flinch. If this story touched your heart, if a tear fell from your eyes, don't just scroll past. Click the like button to honor the lives Traore spoke for. Subscribe if you believe Africa's voice must never be silenced again. Drop a comment with your heart. Let's fill this section with love, pride, and healing. What part broke you the most? What part gave you hope? I'm reading every comment. Let's speak as one. Africa has stories the world needs to hear. Let's tell them together.